And now, the Rink Rap Podcast from Forever Blueshirts, talking all things New York Rangers hockey. Here's your host, Jim Cerny.
What's happening, Blueshirts faithful? Welcome to the Rink Rap Podcast at Forever Blueshirts. I'm your host, Jim Cerny. Thanks for tuning in again this week. And I'm going to let you know right off the top, great guest joining us in segment number 2. That is Pierre McGuire, longtime NHL insider, friend of the show, one of the good guys in the NHL. He's going to give us his take on the state of the New York Rangers. I mean, we're going to go through everything you can imagine, talking about the New York Rangers and breaking things down and, you know, the job Chris Drury didn't do. You can argue that as well ahead of the NHL trade deadline. What's still to come for the New York Rangers? What are some of the good things to hang your hat on with the New York Rangers? What are the things to be concerned about? The state of the New York Rangers with Pierre McGuire. He'll be joining us in the second segment. Thanks for joining us on the podcast again this week, whether you're doing so watching us on YouTube or whether you're just tuning in to the podcast to one of our audio outlets, including Odyssey or Apple Podcasts. No matter how you digest us, thanks for doing so. And also for checking out all of our work over at foreverblueshirts.com, our website. So there's a bunch of thank yous. Make sure to like and follow at Jim Cerny, at Forever Blueshirts. I think I hit all the high points, right? It's just the big wind up getting to the NHL trade deadline last week on Friday. I was gonna come right on. Right after the deadline was over, we knew the Rangers were done. And then and do a quick podcast. And then I kind of pushed it off, said, well, let's hear what Chris Drury's got to say first. So he spoke in the evening, didn't say a whole heck of a lot. So I figured, you know what, let's let this digest. Let me sit on this and think about it, because everybody and their mother was running out, mother, brother, father, uncle, everybody with a microphone and internet access was running out on the, recording their podcast with their hot takes about the Rangers and Chris Drury and all that. So I decided to lay back. But here we are. New week, do a lot of digesting. And I know this pisses some fans off because, I'm pretty rational. And really, fan is short for fanatic, right? So a fanatic is not rational. A fanatic is a lot of times irrational, emotional, right? So I try and not be so emotional. I've worked for teams before. I see things that go on behind the scenes. And I realize that, not working for a team, being a fan, being in the media, covering a team, we don't know everything. We don't know all the facts. So that's my wind up to get to my initial reaction to not trading Vincent Trocheck ahead of the trade deadline was, boy, he is not going to have better value than he has right now. And if you trade him in the offseason, or if you trade him before the next trade deadline, yes, he still has term on his contract. Yes, he's probably still going to be a good player, but he's going to be another year older. He's going to be 33 next season. Instead of 4 playoff runs with the team, he's going to have 3 playoff runs with the team that acquires him. Semantics, maybe. But still, I thought this was the time that his value was going to be at its peak ahead of this trade deadline. Listen, we all know his virtues, right? By the way, I almost sent my water flying into the camera here, but I didn't. That's a gamer right there. I'm telling you that. Still talking to you, still doing the podcast. I was able to, after I hit the water bottle, I was able to catch it in midair before it started to spill all over the camera in front of me. Just letting you know, little pat on the back right there. All right, getting off topic. We all know, what Vincent Trocheck brings. He's a big game player. He's a 200-foot player. He's now an Olympic champion. He's a team player. He's a leader. 5 straight 20-goal seasons. He scored 30 goals earlier in his career. Pretty much pencil him in for 50-plus points a season. Wins a boatload of face-offs. Last year, what was he? 58%. He was near 60% last season. A little bit behind that this year, but he won huge face-offs in the Olympics for the United States. And he's coming off the gold medal win. So, a team that is, looking for that, that player that fills so many responsibilities and holes, power play, penalty kill, even strength, face-offs, right? Vincent Trocheck. There's a lot to like there. And hey, he just won an Olympic gold medal. Now really felt like the time that the Rangers could maximize the trade here. And to Chris Drury's credit, now ride with me here, credit, he had a steep asking price for Vincent Trocheck. Because listen, everything Vincent Trocheck can go do for a Stanley Cup contender or another team, whoever trades for him or wants to trade for him, he already does for the New York Rangers, right? He's already a letter-wearing guy, a leader that is helped lead this team to the conference final. He's also a guy that stood up after Captain Jacob Trouba was traded. He filled that leadership role. He was the team spokesperson last season when it all went to hell. He was a glue. He's a glue guy, right? So I don't need to sell you on Vincent Trocheck or keeping him here with the Rangers, right? Typically, that's the kind of guy you want in your core. The Rangers' issue here is they don't have a lot of chips to trade where they can get a lot back in return. They just don't. Yeah, we can argue the virtues of trading Alexis Lafreniere or Braden Schneider. Get it. And I'm open to those discussions. But then you got to replace these like really good young guys. They're still really good young players, Schneider and Lafreniere. Maybe just not to the level that you expected them to get to. But okay, that aside, Trocheck's a guy that you would want to be a key guy in your core. But he is 32. He's going to turn 33. Still has 3 years to go on his contract. He had missed his first significant amount of time due to injury this season. Again, guys get into their 30s and you begin to wonder, look at JT Miller. That is a guy, and I've said it a ton of times here, that I believe that contract's not going to age well because he's not going to age well. Just the way he plays, and he's been banged up a lot. And this year, that's really shown with JT Miller. So again, that could hold true for Vincent Trocheck too, or he could go back to being the durable guy he's been his entire career. We'll see. So I get, it's type guy that you want in your core. It's type guy that a cup contender would want. So I understand Chris Drury trying to shoot for the moon here, because the Ranger pipeline of prospects is pretty barren, right? Pretty barren. I mean, that's probably being kind. There's not a lot there when it comes to Ranger prospects, especially ones that are on the cusp of, playing in the NHL ready prospects, or on the verge, becoming an NHL player, closer, not farther away, not draft picks where you just drafted them and you got to develop them for 3-4 years or whatever. Rangers just don't have those guys. Look at Hartford. They just don't have those guys. Vinny Trocheck can help get you NHL player, NHL ready player, and a draft pick. So Chris Drury asked for as much as he could get. Nobody was willing to meet his asking price. And we've heard word filter out of Carolina that it was an outrageous asking price. We don't know. I don't know. I've asked around. I made a lot of calls. Nobody seems to know. So Chris Drury's been able to, keep that hunkered down, whatever his asking price was. Got a little bit of a, feel for it. Pierre LeBrun reported, Carolina, might have said some things about what the Rangers were looking for, NHL player, top prospect, and a first round pick. But good on Chris Drury for asking for that. Now the question becomes, and we don't have the answer yet. He holds on to Vincent Trocheck. Okay. That carries now into the offseason. Like, the trade deadline's not the end of possibly trading Vincent Trocheck. Now you head into the offseason. And can you get a better return? Can you get what you were seeking at the trade deadline? Can you now get it in the offseason? Will somebody meet your asking price? Now, a couple things might work to the Rangers' advantage here. First, salary cap goes way up. It's going way up this year. That benefits the Rangers in trying to move Trocheck, even though, he's got a quote unquote modest average annual value of $5.625 million. Like, some teams, yes, some of the upper echelon teams that are right up against the cap, we're going to have trouble fitting him in. But for the most part, you look at that contract and you say, boy, for what he brings and everything, it's almost a steal, right? Certainly a fair contract. It's not an overpay if that's what you're paying him. So you go into the offseason now, salary cap is going up significantly. Second, Trocheck's no trade clause shifts from 12 teams to 10 teams. So it's 2 more teams in the mix. We know we know the West Coast teams are going to be out on him because those are the teams that absolutely are heading his no trade list, whether it's 10 teams or 12 teams. He does not want to go to the West Coast. So, okay, that remains the same. So again, it goes from 12 to 10. So that's a positive. More teams will be involved. More teams, 31 teams, including the Rangers, will have not won the Stanley Cup. So they're going to be trying to find ways to bolster their roster this offseason. So Chris Drury rolling the dice said he's going to get his asking price this offseason. There's no way to judge this until after Vincent Trocheck gets traded. And I do believe he's going to get traded. I thought he was gone before the deadline. Obviously I wasn't right. And, Drury kind of proved us wrong there, or proved me wrong. But I do believe Vincent Trocheck's not a long-term New York Ranger. And here's a side note. I don't think he's going to be upset about it. Like, I got the vibe from Vincent Trocheck when he spoke after the game Saturday against the Devils, that he was just like exhausted, mentally fried, from this whole drama. And, he didn't say, I'm happy to be a Ranger. Like Mike Sullivan was obviously really enthused that Vincent Trocheck is still here. Like as a coach, he loves Vincent Trocheck and what he brings. Vincent Trocheck, yeah, he didn't seem so thrilled to still be a Ranger. I'm not saying he's not happy about it, but I think the uncertainty of his situation, I think, the short term, great. Kids are in school still. I don't have to be separated from my family to finish out this season. I think Trocheck appreciates that he's going to stay with the Rangers and at least through the end of this season. But he knows that's not the end. It's going to pick right up. As soon as the Rangers, are eliminated when their season ends, in mid-April, the conjecture, the rumors, everything, the uncertainty is going to pick up again for Vincent Trocheck until he's finally moved, whether, it's sometime before the draft in late June, whether it's before NHL free agency on July 1, whether it's sometime after that. I tend to believe that those are going to be the 2 biggest pressure points. Like, I don't think Trocheck's going to last, deep into July or the summer or August or whatever. It could happen for sure. I don't think so. I think before the draft or, before free agency, or like Keandre Miller was traded on July 1 last summer. But that still hangs, that's going to be weighing on Vincent Trocheck and his family. So, he didn't seem thrilled that he's still a New York Ranger, I guess because of the uncertainty of it all. But really the big point here is, and we'll talk about this with Pierre McGuire in a little bit in the second segment, is we really can't judge Chris Drury just yet. Yes, my instinct, my stance was to trade Trocheck now. His value, I can't imagine it's going to be any higher than it just was. But maybe some things in the landscape shift this offseason, the ones that I talked about already. And maybe the Rangers ultimately get what they wanted. Or worst case scenario, whatever Minnesota or Carolina or Detroit was offering now, they offer again, right? In the offseason. And the Rangers make that trade. We'll see. May not be the case because now you're trading a guy with, as I said, 30, that will be 33. And let's hope he stays healthy the rest of the way. If he gets hurt again, that's going to be another strike, against the Rangers. 3 years left on his contract. So we'll see. I'm holding off complete judgment. I'm telling you, without having all the facts, I would have done my utmost to trade Trocheck before the deadline. But I'm willing to see what happens next without losing my mind about it. So trade deadline, you had that. And then, really nothing else. I had heard that, some teams had called, sniffed around Schneider and Lafreniere, but, I never saw that happening. Either one of those guys being traded at the deadline. That to me is like Keandre Miller. That happens sometime in the offseason, if it happens at all. And Alexis Lafreniere, boy, is his game, right? This is some of the best kind of consistent play out of him we've seen in a while, so results-wise. And it coincides with the Artemi Panarin trade. So it raises, it's a great debate. And then again, Pierre and I'll ask him about it, get his take on it. It's a great debate. Was Lafreniere really deferring to Panarin when they were line mates? And listen, they got shaken up and broken up, and they weren't always together this season for sure. But even on the power play, he gets first time on the first power play unit minutes. And he got some before, but it wasn't consistent. But now he's a guy. He's the guy, right? He's a key guy on the power play. And he's certainly at even strength too, finding some really good chemistry with Mika Zibanejad and Gabe Perreault. And listen, I went on and on about this on the previous podcast about what makes this an acceptable season, if that's the right word. They don't make the playoffs. That's unacceptable. Some of the crap we saw them play like this year, unacceptable. You go down the line, forcing management's hands into a retool, rebuild, reset, whatever you want to call it. All of that's unacceptable. But what becomes acceptable this season and provides glimmer for hope and some success is if Gabe Perreault shows that he's an NHL player and somebody that you can really build around in your core. And I think we're starting to see that. And even before the stats started piling up, the goals, the assists, and what have you, and the multi-point games that he's had, even before that, you could see he was gaining confidence. I like the way he wins puck battles. He did that right from game one, coming up to the NHL. Go to the net, go to the dirty areas, try to win goal, try to produce offense that way. But now we're starting to see like he's relaxing and he has trust in Zibanejad and Lafreniere, and they're figuring each other out as line mates. And that sick pass that he made, behind the back pass on the power play to Mika, for the goal against the Flyers the other night. Love it. So where did he score his goal? He scored it from atop the blue paint, whacking away at one. He gets in on a forecheck, creates a turnover, leads directly to a goal for Zibanejad. That's all in the Flyers game. But it's all been building towards this. And he's had these really good moments, creating a lot of scoring opportunities for himself and his line mates. That, if he shows that, that's a big success to this season. Now, the other part of this here, and again, I think this might be the first thing I'll ask Pierre, is how much do you buy in? Like if you're an executive, if you're Chris Drury, or if you're Coach Mike Sullivan, you see, hey, the Rangers have points in 5 of 6 games since the Olympic break. How much do you really buy into that? Or is this a case of players who, once they're out of it and they relax and the pressure's off? I mean, the pressure's off the Rangers right now. Oh, then they figure it out and they play well. I'm not talking about specific, I'm not naming specific players, but collectively. That very well could be the case. You know, Pierre's been in management. He's been a coach in the NHL. He's certainly been around and talked to all the coaches and management people as an NHL insider. Curious to get his take on that. Because I don't know what's real. Like, is what I'm seeing from Lafreniere real right now? Or is it just because the pressure's off? Mika's got like a real resume in the NHL. Right? He's about to hit 800 points. He's scored over 300 goals in his career. He's got a real resume. And he was also producing and their best offensive player all season, their most consistent guy. So, you know, Mika's Mika. Igor's Igor. You know, but the rest of this group, is the pressure off now? Not going to make the playoffs. You don't have to win games. You know, you're not looking at the standings. The pressure's off. Is that why the Rangers are having success right now? We'll get into that. I want to hear what Pierre's take is, because I admit I have my doubts. Certainly. I mean, it's more fun to watch. You know, they're winning games, throwing the puck around. They're scoring a lot more goals, not squeezing their sticks. Guys look confident out there. You know, see guys laughing on the bench, relaxed. See Mika laugh on the ice. Seeing how the guys all came together after Hmelash's first NHL goal the other night at the Garden. Like these feel-good moments. Guys they just look like they're finally enjoying themselves. But what happens when you go back to square one next season? And I know it's going to be a different group and everything, and there will be different faces in there. But what happens then? Pressure's on. Start of the season. Everyone's equal. You know, you don't suck anymore. You're not at the bottom of the standings. These games do count. These points do count. Does it revert back to what we saw much of this season? Or are the Rangers really building something here? Again, that's one of those things we'll answer down the road. Certainly, it's more fun to watch. Rangers hockey, for the most part, has not been fun to watch this season. It's been a little bit more fun since the Olympic break, right? Crazy how it coincides, too, with the captain, JT Miller, out of the lineup. We'll get into that. I know there are people pointing that out left and right on social media. So real quick, Rangers make their moves not only right before the deadline, but going back to late January. They traded Carson Soucy to the Islanders, got a 3rd round pick in return. Thought that was a good get for them. Plus, the Rangers did right by Soucy, whose wife just had a baby, and he gets to stay in New York. They get to stay in their home. Nothing really to dislike about that trade. He was on an expiring contract. Then we get to the Panarin trade. Obviously, goes to the Kings. He held all the cards with the no movement clause, and the Rangers are able to pry back a couple conditional draft picks. No first rounder or anything, conditional draft picks and top prospects. The Kings' top prospect, Liam Greentree, who is certainly played really, really well. 16 points in 9 games. I believe that those numbers are right. Or at least 16 points in the first 9 games after the trade, playing in the Ontario Hockey League. And he fits the molds, right? So, a guy with pedigree. He's got some talent. A lot of scouts will tell you he's going to be a middle 6 guy, but let's see what he ends up being. But he's on the cusp of being NHL ready. He'll be 21 next season. He's going to come to training camp. He's going to be a pro. He goes down to Hartford and grows his game a little bit like Gabe Perreault did it. Maybe he's ready for a role with the Rangers next season. We'll see, but he's on the cusp. So he fits what they need. So that trade was that trade. And we talked about that in previous shows. Then they just traded Sam Carrick, a guy they didn't have to trade. I gave you my stance last week. I'm like, listen, unless you get like a mid-round pick for him, I'd keep him, right? Another year at $1 million, and he anchors your fourth line and character guy, good leader. But the Rangers did get a mid-round pick, and they got a later round pick too. So they shipped him off to Buffalo. Very cool to see him score in his Sabres debut, by the way. So he gets a crack at going to the playoffs. And again, the Rangers will backfill on that fourth line. I know Juuso Parsonen's there now. I'm not sure that he is a fourth line answer, down the road and in the future, but he's there for now. Maybe we'll get a look at Dylan Rubrek. Maybe he'll get a call at some point before the season's out and maybe get some games, see how that second-year pro looks. Coming up from Hartford, maybe getting some fourth line minutes, certainly add some size. Can you imagine the size of him, Hamelash, and Edstrom on the fourth line? Jeez. That's not even counting in Matt Rempe, who I figure is out for the season following a second surgery. Rangers haven't said that, but I'm just assuming we're not going to see a lot of him coming off the second thumb surgery. It's certainly the rest of this season. So there's that trade. That was fine. Cut bait with Brennan Othmann, sent him to Calgary. Got a prospect, Jacob Battaglia, in return. Second round pick, guy who scored a little bit. He's going to be 19, 20 years old. Get him in your system. What wasn't working with Othmann, and I think we all saw, and certainly the Rangers did, it wasn't going to work with Rangers, and it wasn't going to work under Mike Sullivan. And you can blame Sullivan or not, but he clearly saw things in Othmann's game that he didn't like, especially defensively, the 200-foot game. So Rangers trade him, cut bait, get Jacob Battaglia. There you go. And then the final trade was the minor league trade, trading Derek Pouliot to the Chicago Blackhawks and bringing in Aiden Thompson, who had a really nice debut, 2 assists in his debut. Good skater, pedigree of scoring, back in college. The thing that gives me pause here, I don't know what type of NHL prospect he really is. And we'll see. But the fact that he's 24 years old, he was an older collegiate player because he played in the USHL for a couple of years, then went to college. His rookie pro season is as a 24-year-old. So really, let me backtrack. And he's not at the cusp of being NHL ready from anybody you speak with. So what do the Rangers really have there? But it's another body. It's another skilled guy. Take a chance on him, just like you take a chance on Greentree, just like you're going to take a chance now on Jacob Battaglia, like you're taking a chance at Ty Cartier, who's played really, really well on the third line. Great chemistry with Noah Laba so far. Again, he's a limited player. He is what he is, a bottom six guy, but he's a real energy guy. And maybe the Rangers found something in him. And maybe not. They claimed him off waivers. But what's it costing you? But so far, so good with him. So in any case, that gets you through the trade deadline and what have you. Let me just tee it up by saying Pierre McGuire will join us after the break, and we will get to the entire state of the New York Rangers. That's next on Rink Wrap. Welcome back to Rink Wrap at Forever Blueshirts. I'm Jim Cerny, joined today by the unmistakable Pierre McGuire, Stanley Cup champion, and certainly longtime NHL insider, broadcaster, coach, you name it. He's done it all, continues to do so. Pierre, thanks for a few minutes today.
Anytime for you, Jim. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So help me out with this argument that I was having with myself in the opening segment of the show, okay? We know what the Rangers season has been this year. Now Artemi Panarin's been traded. It's a retool, not a rebuild. It's a retool. And but since the break, with Shesterkin and Fox back in the lineup, Rangers all of a sudden playing some better hockey here. But I throw the caution out there saying you can't throw the first 55, 60 games of the season out the window and say, "Whoa, look at them now. Look how they flipped the script." Dude, I have the buyer beware feeling of, boy, the pressure's off. You're not making the playoffs. Go out, play hockey, and just do what you do. But you got to take the results and even some of the good things that happen with a little bit of grain of salt. So am I overplaying that too much, or you think I'm on the mark, especially in consideration with the New York Rangers here?
I think you're right on the mark. So a lot of hockey executives call it fool's gold. And this time of the year, teams that are already clearly out of the playoff run, they're really dangerous to play against, especially if you're an elite team that wants to solidify home ice or be in a playoff position, Jim. And I think that's part of it, when you talk about with teams like the New York Rangers right now. So I look for the positives in teams that want to work hard. And one of the positives is a play of Mika Zibanejad, the developing play of Gabe Perreault. Lafreniere looks like he's more comfortable playing with Zibanejad, which is positive. You talked about getting Adam Fox back. That's a huge thing, a real positive thing. And so there's more positive than negative right now. I think the coaching staff is starting to feel their way through this roster in particular. It's going to be a tough year for free agents. It's not a real good year. So I don't think Chris Drury can go down that road. It's been a really tough year in Hartford, a few last couple of years in Hartford. So there's some work to be done. They'll be young. I don't know what you want to call it, rebuild, retool, doesn't really matter. The truth of the matter is they got some work to do.
So yes, and we'll get into all that, but it's interesting because I get so much feedback from the Ranger fans, right? And like half the group, it's almost split right down the middle. Half the group they're fired up. They're like, look, we got Igor back. He's standing on his head. He's back to being Igor. Everything's falling into place. Oh, if Fox and Igor hadn't gotten hurt, we were going to be a playoff team. Look at what they're showing now. And then you got the other half shaking their head as you are saying, no.
I'm first of all, my brother owns a lot of season tickets to the Rangers, and he goes to a lot of games. So I'm probably slighted more towards the Rangers. I grew up in Montreal. I'm a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. Yeah. I was fortunate to be a Pittsburgh Penguin for a long time, and I'm really proud of that. And we had some really good years. And I'm real good friends with a lot of old New York Ranger players. So, I mean, I'm not a fan one way or the other. I'm just going to say I'm going to be fair here. The biggest thing that's got to happen in New York right now internally, players need to get better. Braden Schneider needs to get better. Lafreniere needs to get better. They've had this laundry list of players, especially young guys, that haven't gotten better. And that's not good for the organization. Guys got to start to be developed, and hopefully that will take place with this new coaching staff.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and leads right into a guy like Brennan Othmann, another first-round pick, that they had high hopes for, 50-goal scorer in junior, and it just didn't happen under multiple coaching staffs in New York. And it was clear in training camp that Mike Sullivan was not high on this kid. He gave him the opportunities in camp, and then he was among the first cuts. And then he was a fourth liner when he was up in the NHL this year. But that's just the another, latest example. Just speaking to him specifically, and I know it's hard. You're not here on a day-by-day basis, but what did you see that maybe didn't work with the player or with the development there? And do you still see something in him as an NHL player? He's still a kid, just 23.
Yeah, I know his agent really ill, Patrick Morris, who works for Newport Sports Management, Jim. And I think the biggest thing with Brennan is just figuring out what kind of player he's going to be in the National Hockey League. Was he going to be a grinder? Was he going to be a skill guy? Was he going to be a guy that kind of stabilizes things physically? There's a lot of different questions, and I don't think that ever got sorted out with him. You made an excellent point, by the way, about all the different coaches. For a lot of those guys, like look at Keandre Miller. How many coaching staffs did he play for before he got traded away? I mean, that's been part of the problem with the development too. It's been, Gerard Gallant, it's Peter Laviolette, it's Mike Sull. I mean, it's different coaches with different philosophies. And it's problematic when you do that over a short period of time. Guys just lose their way. And I think that's part of what happened with Brennan Othmann. He just couldn't find a way of figuring out his role within the confines of the team.
Yeah, and speaking about coaching staffs, last time we had John, it was not long after Sully had been named coach. David Quinn came in as an assistant. I asked a bunch of questions about what is that an awkward situation? Quinny coming back. Used to be head coach. Now he's an assistant. And boy, you talk about pretty seamless transitions, how it's been handled by David Quinn, by Mike Sullivan, and maybe most importantly by, Chris Drury, that he said, okay, Sully, you're the coach. If he's your assistant, we're going to bring him in, even though I fired the guy before. But that's actually, you said it was going to work. You said the people involved are quality people. They're going to make it work. Yeah. I had question marks, but I think looking back on it now, I think you were spot on.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Jim. Part of it is a reference point to my career. When Sullivan was playing at BU, David Quinn was not, even though they were teammates, because David Quinn was a first-round pick of the Minnesota North Stars. It had a thing called Christmas disease. It ended his career as a player, but you always knew he was going to be a good coach. David used to work with me at a lot of the hockey schools that I had in the Boston area at the time. I watched Chris Drury win a Hobie Baker at Boston University. I watched Joe Sacco play with David Quinn when he was playing and with Mike Sullivan. So that BU familiarity was obviously really important. And they trust one another. And they come from this unbelievable coaching legacy that was started by Jack Parker, who I have so much respect for. And he got his from Jack Kelly, the legendary Jack Kelly, who coached at BU and also coached in the NHL with the Hartford Whalers. And I remember when I was coaching the Hartford Whalers, Jack Kelly coming up to me at an all-star game, which happened to be in New York, by the way. And he said to me, he goes, the one thing about my experience at BU? I said, no, coach, I have no idea. He goes, the loyalty of BU people to BU people in the hockey world. I thought it was a fascinating thing because at the time I had John Cullen in Hartford. I also had John in Pittsburgh, and he was a legendary BU player. So that's kind of how that all came. And then when I saw all those BU guys working for the Rangers, I said, I think it won't be a problem.
Hasn't been a problem. And the other thing that that's stuck in my head, and I actually wrote a story based on what you said about it, was you said they're going to be a better defensive team. With Sully as coach, they're going to be more structured. But with Quinn back there coaching the defense corps especially, they're going to be a better defensive group. And we saw that especially early in the season, right from the get-go. Yeah. There was a commitment, a buy-in, and just a better structure defensively. Now, it's gone off the rails somewhat, for sure. Guys, you mentioned Schneider is a great example. Started, kind of doing things that he had done before. He was also put in, into a role in the top pair when Fox was hurt twice this season. That was probably above his level. But that said, looking at the overall 60-odd games into the season, you still have to say, even though there are some hiccups and there were injuries didn't help and all that, they are a better defensive team. There is more structure there than I think we saw, even when they were having that tremendous success in the run to the 24 conference final. I see more structure out of this group. Curious if you see the same thing or if you think I'm totally off the rails here.
No, Jim, I think you're spot on. The development of players has to continue. So Schneider, they're going to have to crack the whip, get him back on the rails. Scotty Morrow's a kid. I know he's back and forth. He's on the yo-yo between Hartford and New York. They're going to have to get him to be bought in more defensively. I mean, I've known Scotty Morrow since he played for Mid Fairfield. My son and he were teammates for 5 years, so I know the family. Yeah. The uncle actually played for us in Hartford when I was there, so Scott Morrow was his name too. I know the family pretty well, and I have a lot of respect for him. But he's an important piece going forward because of who they traded to get him. I mean, they traded Keandre Miller, so this speaks to the little bit of the development. But no, I think you're right on. The other thing they're going to have to really be aware of, and I'm pretty sure they are, Adam Fox. They're going to have to figure out the Adam Fox conundrum that is, because that Olympic stuff had to be painful for Foxy. And, he's been hurt twice, and you wonder if he's really part of the long-term plan or if he's not. And that's up to the Rangers management and coaching staff to figure that out. But Adam Fox is still a very viable and a good player in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, and of course, as we've been debating here for the last couple of weeks since he came back in the lineup and met with the media, talked about the retool for the first time, there was no, this is a guy that moved heaven and earth to get to the New York Rangers, right? Not just with, Carolina, but with Calgary as well, flipping at Calgary and then Carolina. He moved heaven and earth to be a Ranger, to play at home. He loves it. He loves it. He's been asked point blank a couple times about his future, being part of the retool, and he is just, He's pushed it off. He said, that's a conversation for the off season, which I think in part is a wise approach, but I think it caught a lot of people off guard because he's been such a Ranger, always wanted to be a Ranger. And now at the peak of his career, 28 years old, he's like, it gives the vibe that, let's see.
Well, it's a good way to look at it. So Jim, I'll just tell you this. His agent is a guy named Matt Cater, and Matt is an amazingly smart hockey person. He was a great player at Trinity College in West Hartford, Connecticut. He was an outstanding scout with the St. Louis Blues. He worked there with Teddy Hampson and the late Jack Evans and with Peter Stastny, believe it or not. And then he got into the agent's business, and he knows how to move levers around the National Hockey League. And that's the guy that helped orchestrate that Calgary to Carolina to New York. He did an amazing job for his client. And so you got to know, and I know Chris Drury is aware of this. Matt Cater is not a big name that everybody's talking about, but he's the guy behind the scenes that makes a lot of stuff happen for his players. He was also Chris Kreider's agent. He's Leo Carlson's agent. I can go down the line. He's got a plethora of Zdeno Chara was one of his players. I mean, I can go down the line with all the guys that he's represented over the course of time. But he's going to be very protective of Adam Fox. I can tell you that right now. And so the Rangers, they're going to have to break bread at the end of the year and come up with a way they're going to figure this out long term. Or if not, I would imagine that, Adam could move. But I still think he'll be a Ranger, but they're going to have to sit down and figure this out at the end of the year.
Yeah. Do you think that there's something to Alexis Lafreniere's had a nice little push here since Artemi Panarin was traded. And, now the buzz is, well, maybe he deferred too much. He often played on a line. In fact, spent like a season and a half straight through as Panarin's line mate. That maybe he deferred to the other players, that he needs the puck a little bit more. Needs to be more of the guy, let's say. Do you buy into that? And what do you think? What have you seen since the Panarin trade? Because Laf has taken it to another level here, even though it's a small sample size.
I've had a chance to work with some pretty good young players over the course of my career. Jaromir Jagr was one of them. Jeff Sanderson was another one of them. I remember the late Pavel Demitra like it was yesterday up in Ottawa. Some pretty good young players. And those are just three that are names that people would know. They were all workaholics. They were all addicted to being at the rink and wanting to be really good. And we'd have to kick Jaromir off the ice. Sandy would rip pucks all day long. I'd pass him pucks and he'd rip pucks. He was really addicted to wanting to be a big goal scorer. I think the 2 years I was with him, he had 42 and 44, something like that. And Pavel Demitra was much the same as Jeff, just wanted to rip pucks and make his game better. I think you're starting to see a little more of that from Lafreniere. I'm not at the practices, obviously, but I talk to enough people. You're starting to see a better work habit from him, which I think is really important for a young player. But I also think Zibanejad's had such a good year. Mika's been really good. I think everybody knows that's a Ranger fan. Yeah. And putting that young kid on there, and I watched them play a ton, and Gabe Perreault, that line's really good now. And because of that, I think Lafreniere gets enthusiastic because of the young guy, Perreault. He's a real good player. I watched him a ton at Boston College. He played with Ryan Leonard and James Higgins. That line was phenomenal at BC when they were there. And before Higgins got there, it was Will Smith, who's playing in San Jose right now. So I know the body of work of the player pretty well. I think that's helped Lafreniere a lot, having Gabe Perreault, another young guy on his line.
Yeah, totally agree. And Gabe, the one thing, I know some people want to focus on, he's 5'10", he's 180 pounds. And what stood out to me since he's been up here, even before the goals started going in and the points started piling up and he started getting more minutes with Mika, recently, is that the one thing he consistently did was win puck battles along the boards because he's so smart. He gets there first, or he gets his stick or his body in the right position. He's so smart. And he also has the guts. He goes to the net. He has 6 goals so far. If I'm not mistaken, 4 of the 6 are probably from within 10, 12 feet of the goal, including
he's not afraid at all, number one. No. Number two, he's got this amazing peripheral vision that allows him to see hits that are coming either the right side or the left side. And he's got this awesome escapability, Jim. It's really cool to watch him play. And I watched him a lot last year. I watched him play 5 times in Hockey East games, and 4 of those 5 were against Northeastern University. And those were always really good games. Northeastern eventually knocked BC out of the Hockey East tournament last year. I happened to be at the game, but I've watched him a lot live and obviously on TV. And it was a heck of a draft pick, and he's going to be a heck of a New York Ranger. He's going to be a really good player for the Rangers.
Yeah, totally agree. So quick question on the trade deadline with the Rangers. Again, there are camps. Right? They're always going to be this. People are going to be fired up either way, whether Chris Drury made a trade, dealt Vincent Trocheck, or didn't, or what have you. He didn't. He stuck to his guns. He had a price. Other teams thought it was a little too high or exorbitant, whatever the word is. So they hold on to Vinny Trocheck. Certainly never a bad choice when Vinny Trocheck and he's staying on your side. But certainly the belief is that he's going to get moved during the summer. And I know we don't have a final, feel on this, right? Everyone wants to do a trade grade or, how's the GM doing here? But that said, kind of your thoughts about that and about the process and about Chris sticking to his guns here he's hoping to make that better move during the offseason.
I think that probably was the most prudent thing to do. I think a lot of people saw what price points weren't. And I think a lot of people saw what Panarin went for, and they were like, okay, maybe the price points aren't going to be as high this year as they have been in years past. So I don't have a problem with what Chris did there. Panarin clearly wanted to move on, and they put him in a place where his agent obviously wanted him to be, which I think is really good because he's going to re-sign there. And by the way, his agent just moved. Paul Theophanis just moved to Los Angeles. I find that interesting, but that's another story for another day. But no, I think fans got to understand, like, a general manager's responsibility is not for immediate, it's for long-term and sustained growth. And I think that's probably why Chris didn't make the move that he made. I get it. People get frustrated. I look at the Montreal Canadiens. The East has never been more fluid. The Canes didn't do anything at the deadline. And I think if they would have done a little bit of what Buffalo did, they might have given themselves a better chance. Buffalo did an amazing job at the deadline. So everybody's got their own thing, just like I think Detroit did a fantastic job at the deadline. But you look at Buffalo and Detroit, one hasn't been in the playoffs since 2016, and the other one hasn't been in the playoffs since 2013. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
So quickly looking at the NHL trade deadline, I made the argument that the Colorado Avalanche, even before the Kadri trade, because that Kadri trade actually came, a couple hours after the deadline. Yeah. So it was late. It was in queue, but it came out late. But I thought even before that, excuse me, I really liked where they stood before the deadline, obviously, but afterwards, because I didn't feel like anybody closed the gap significantly on them. I know Minnesota made a lot of moves. Their big move, of course, was December. That was closing the gap with Quinn. But, right ahead of the deadline, I didn't feel like, Dallas got, gets Myers, and I didn't feel like anybody really closed the gap. So I really liked Colorado, how they came out of the trade deadline, and then they added Kadri. I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a handful. So I know it's easy to say, oh, the team with the best record, they're going to be the favorites. They've won a cup already, within the last few years. But it's hard to look past them and saying, boy, are they the distinct Stanley Cup favorite in my eyes. I know it's still early, but.
Yeah, you forgot one big get they made. They traded Sammy Girard to Pittsburgh for Brett Kulak. Kulak's been to the final 3 times. I hear all these reporters saying, he's been to the Stanley Cup final twice. No, he hasn't. He's been there 3 times, once with Montreal and twice with Edmonton. He's a big package. He can really skate. That's a huge addition for their team. They were getting redundant with Sammy Girard because they have Sam Malinsky there, who's a really good defenseman out of Cornell University. He's a free agent, never drafted. So they've got, pretty good weaponry in the back end. But then you add a big guy that can skate like Kulak. That's huge for that team. I think Colorado right now going in, they got to be the favorite. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but they got to be the favorite. If their goaltending can hold up and Nathan McKinnon can stay healthy, I mean, that's, Marty Natchez stays healthy. They got a lot of stuff going on there. They're good. They got good depth players. They got a lot of stuff going. Nicky Roy was a good pick too from Toronto. Nicky's a really good fourth line center. I mean, he was playing in Toronto as a 3, but if he's playing as a 4 just behind Jack Drury in Colorado, that's significant stuff, Jim. So I think Colorado did a good job. Minnesota's going to be tough. Everybody's focusing on just the Quinn Hughes stuff, but that Michael McCarron was a really good pickup for them. I know their roster really well. My son's in their organization as a player. Michael McCarron was a really good pickup. And I would tell you one other thing is that you look at Foligno going over and the two Foligno boys playing together, that's a lot of emotional energy, and they're really revered guys around the league. So I think Billy's pushed a lot of really good buttons, and they really haven't traded away anybody from their roster where you could say, oh, man, that's a huge hole because we traded that player away. The kids they traded away, Liam Ogren and Marco Rossi, Zev Buyam, they're all good players. I know them all really well, all of them really well. They're good players. They're going to do really good things in Vancouver over time. But Minnesota doesn't miss those guys right now. They don't.
Right. And so where do you stand on this? So again, talk about really great debates. And it just comes to the forefront this year, talking about Minnesota is one of those teams, Minnesota, Dallas, somebody's going to be gone after one round.
Yeah.
How do you feel about 1-8, 2-7, 3-6? The way it used to be for us, I won't call us old timers. We're veterans. We're veterans.
Us veteran guys?
Yeah.
No, Jim, I'm with you, by the way. I'm done. We don't need – I know the TV numbers pretty well, the ratings. I follow them pretty close because I was part of it for a long time. You don't need those division rivalry games anymore to build up the animosity. I think conference play 1-8, 2-7, 3-6, 4-5, that works. It's really unfortunate. We're seeing so many good teams get bopped out in the first or second round. I think we got to change that. Hopefully the league will look at that. I also think there should be a play-in game. I really do. The league's grown. We haven't added any. I remember when there were 21 teams and we'd have 16 teams in the playoffs. Well, now we got 32 teams. Half the league doesn't make it. I think we should have a play-in game. Honestly, I really believe we should, like what baseball's done. I think it's really smart. And if we did that, it would give everybody a lot of hope down the stretch to try to make it into that playoff game or play-in game. And you know what, Jim? The playoffs are like the lottery. You got to be in it to win it. So if you don't have a ticket, you don't get a chance to win.
That's true. All right, listen, you've been very generous with your time today. Appreciate it.
We're good.
I did want to ask you, circling back to Rangers and talking about your TV career, you were there between the benches for some great moments, playoff moments, regular season as well. But, Henrik Lundqvist's brilliance, some amazing Game 7 wins, overtime wins and all that. And I've had a bunch of those guys on the show. Derek Stepan's been here to talk about those moments, Dominic Moore, So I'm wondering, and we'll just keep it Rangers specific.
Yeah.
Is there a moment between the benches that stood out to you during those, kind of that decade run there with the Rangers, either the Torts Rangers or the Vigneault Rangers, that stood out to you, maybe for one reason or another, more than any other during those runs?
The emotion of the Rangers beating Washington on a step-on goal on a Sunday afternoon. I remember that one like it was yesterday. I couldn't give you the game number because back then I was doing a game every night in a different city. But it
was Game 7.
I just remember that really well. I remember Hank being so good for so long, and some of it was in victory and some of it was in defeat. I remember the showdown in 2012 with the Devils, and he loses to Brodeur, but it was just an amazing series. I remember that clear as day. Another one was, I remember John Tortorella, who coached. So I thought John coached fantastically well with the Rangers. I remember John getting really mad in Philadelphia at a couple of the forwards. I won't give you their names. I don't think it's appropriate. But he was mad because they weren't blocking shots. And one of the guys said to me, yeah, I don't block a lot. He said it to me. I didn't report it, but I can say it now. We're past the statute of limitations. He goes, yeah, I don't block a lot of shots, but I score a bunch of goals. He doesn't seem to remember that. So I have so many good memories. Obviously, the Martinez goal, I know it's a bad one for Rangers in 2014 when they lose in LA, obviously. But I have nothing but great thought. I loved MSG. I loved going in there all the time. Torts was really good. He was a really good coach. I was a huge fan of John Davidson. I think the world of John. And I worked with John for a year in 2006. He and Doc Emmerich and I did the NBC shows before John moved out to St. Louis. But yeah, the one goal, I remember the step-on goal like it was yesterday. And, Step was a really good player for a long time. And, one of the reasons why I cheered for him is he was the captain. You can go look this up, Jim, because I know you're a huge historian. In 2010, it's the John Carlson golden goal in the World Junior in Saskatoon. And Stepan was the captain of that team.
Yes,
and I'll tell you what, he put on a heck of a show. The post-game show, and I think it's on YouTube, was led by Stepan, and it was so good to watch. They crushed the country spirit in Canada, but they did an amazing job for USA Hockey. I will always remember Derek Stepan as being a winner, a big-time winner.
That is awesome. That's a great tale. You mentioned Martinez, and I tell this story a lot. I was working for the Rangers then, so I was upstairs. They in LA. They had me sitting, right next to the assistant coaches. So Benny Allaire was to my right, and so the coach is there, coach on the headset, and you feel like, I mean, obviously you're more steeped in it than I am, but after all these years of covering hockey, I feel like, I see things pretty quickly and all that. And Benny and the other assistant coaches there, probably a full 2 seconds before I notice, this missed shot down at this end of the ice is going to lead to, an odd man rush the other way. And nobody is picking up Alec Martinez. You just heard to my right, shit. And then Martinez buries it. And so quietly, the coaches, they all, they had their binders and everything open. There was no punching, throwing, anything. Just close up the binder. Benny pats me on the back, says, "See you downstairs." That was it. It just struck me, now listen, behind the doors, who knows, what was being said or done or whatever, but just the professionalism, how they comported themselves, but also the vision, like how they knew, oh shoot, we're in trouble. Like at least a split second or two before I had any idea that they were in trouble,
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to finish off with this one. I remember in 1991 walking to the arena in Bloomington, Minnesota. We were playing the North Stars in the Stanley Cup final, and it was a beautiful sunny day in late May. The NHL didn't go into June yet. So it was late May. We were playing game 6 in the Stanley Cup final, and it was my first time in the final. And I remember looking at Scotty Bowman and Bob Johnson and talking to them and saying, I couldn't imagine what it would be like to go this far and lose. And Scotty goes, "You think we're winning tonight?" And I said, "I know we're winning tonight." And we ended up winning 8-0. We did. We ended up winning 8-0. But what I felt so bad for the guys in Minnesota, because I'd known a lot of their amateur scouts. I obviously knew Bob Gainey really well. I knew Andy Murray really well, Rick Wilson. They had a really good staff there. Mike Eves, really good staff. And Scotty told me afterwards, we were on the plane flying home. Everybody's feeling happy. He goes, the first 3 times I coached in the Stanley Cup final, I lost. It's the worst pain you could ever imagine. He was in St. Louis back then. And he said, it's the worst pain you could ever imagine. And I said, I never want to experience that. And fortunately for me, I haven't had the opportunity to finish it. We won again the next year, and then I moved on. But it's got to be unbelievably painful to go all the way to the end and lose.
Yeah. And to carry yourself, it's such a, and we see it year after year. It wasn't just the Rangers in 14. I mean, it's year after year. You see these coaches and these players who go through hell to get to that point, especially if it's, like a game 7, like Connor and the Oilers a couple of years ago, and the class and the professionalism that these guys, typically carry themselves with in those moments.
I remember 06 like it was yesterday. Edmonton losing to Carolina in game 7 in Carolina. Fernando Pisani forced a game 7. We were there calling it, John Davidson, Doc Emmerich, and I. And I remember Edmonton losing. McTavish was coaching. Craig McTavish, Ranger favorite, because he won the Stanley Cup, won the big faceoff. Mac T was coaching. He couldn't have been a bigger gentleman. Could not have been a bigger gentleman. So it's to your point. You're spot on, Jim, with that. Absolutely.
Good stuff. Pierre McGuire, thank you so much for spending so much of your day with us today. I always enjoy when we get to catch up. And hopefully let's do less time in between. I'd love to bring you back on.
Yeah, I told you anytime. It's my pleasure. I love your passion for the sport, and I love the way you deal with Rangers. You know, the Rangers are a really important franchise in the league, a really important franchise. Got to get them going again. Got to get them going.
Retool, not rebuild. Remember that.
Okay, I'm with you. See you, Jim.